Now that's got your attention, hasn't it? Hello, good evening, welcome, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. My name is David O'Regan. I'm a cardiac surgeon in Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, and I'm also the director of the Faculty of Surgical Trainers for the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Thank you for your support and all the likes, and please continue to submit photographs of your practice at home. Why I introduce the sword this evening, it is a hobby of mine, but what I like are some of the philosophies that have been taught since the 1600s about how to use the sword. And I was reflecting that we are not very good at teaching people how to use a scalpel. This is a live blade. The edge is called the ha. I'm not sure if it's a ha-ha. The slicing bit is a curve at the end called the boshi. And this sword is cast out like a rod, like a fishing rod. And it's the slice that counts. And the point here is the kasaki. And when holding that, the kasaki should be pointing at your opponent's throat. Should they want to advance towards you, they'll naturally impale themselves. When I was looking through my book on drawing the sword, I was taken by a couple of paragraphs. It says here, when you cut an enemy's armpit with a diagonal downwards cut, you cut from the left shoulder. Remember that the sword etiquette applies whether you're standing or whether you're sitting, that you keep your back straight, your left wrist close to your waist, and your eyes on the opponent all the time. But even for practice, they recommend you ask a friend, toss oranges or limes to you so you can draw your sword and slice through them and practice. And when you get really good, you turn your back on the person throwing the oranges and limes and you listen for the sound and turn around and cut the orange or lime. If you have never seen it, there's a YouTube video of a samurai warrior, modern day, taking his sword out and cutting a 1 centimeter plastic pellet in half, fired from a gun 50 meters away. Now, when I advertised for this evening's meeting, a colleague, Linda, reflected, and I echo what she said, that there seems to be a hesitancy and a reticence using the blade. And that is what I'd like to address this evening. And as a cardiac surgeon, people often scoff that you do one operation only because you got one incision. But I put it to you, you try and get 22 centimeters perfectly straight down the middle. And the perfectly straight down the middle is important. There's one other little bit of philosophy on this. Before you take the knife through anybody's skin, be certain what you're doing and why, and understand, as the samurai said, the principles of the craft and attend to the smallest detail. So when I started surgery and I wanted to do a Ramstead procedure in a child when I was in SHO, they probably thought a precocious training, perhaps. But Mr. William Walter Frederick Southwood said, Mr. O'Regan, I'm not going to teach you to do that yet until you know how to hold a knife properly and cut straight. And it's a lesson that I've remembered ever since because it is extremely important and pertinent. So your incisions follow decisions. and your incisions need to be correctly aligned to the anatomy of the body. Now, the body habitus, as we all know, changes in everybody, and the only fixed landmarks are the bones, bony landmarks. So when you're making your incision, be certain that you make your incisions according to the bony landmarks. I've set up a little model here to hopefully demonstrate something to you and reflect on what a trainer said to me in the past. He said that a good surgeon is one can be determined on how well they demonstrate, how well they actually drape. I'm sorry, I've got my camera caught. So I'm just going to take you through, I beg your pardon. It's a problem with the live, isn't it? So excuse me for a moment. And that's on the table. My camera cable, it got caught around the post. So Mr. Lincoln said to me when I was training, you can tell how good a surgeon is by how well they draped. And putting nice green drapes over an abdomen, and there's an umbilicus, you think, wow. And many a training surgeon has been caught out by looking at this and then saying, I'm going to do a midline incision. I'm using a pen to demonstrate, like that. And what the mistake has been made is that they've lined the incision with the drapes. And they have not aligned the incision with the patient. So imagine that this is the shoulders and the hips. And now I orientate the patient properly. The incision is completely off. And part of your responsibility as a surgeon is to ensure that you put the patient on the table, make sure they're in the right position and properly aligned to enable you to make the proper incisions. And I wouldn't leave that to anybody else, because you are making the incision and it's your responsibility to ensure they are properly placed. So let us come on to the next basic principle. The next basic principle is how to mount a blade. So I like these 22 blades, and I've got a hemostat on the blunt side of the blade and aligning that to a blade holder, and you can see the bevel and the slope aligned, and inside the blade handle there's a groove, and the blade sits in that groove. So holding the blade steady on a hemostat, pointing into a surface that's solid and not a patient or anybody else, simply slide the blade into that groove and into position. To take it off, lift it off the bevel, get a firm grip, and retract, one hand moving and point it into a surface. I've seen some catastrophes in the past. And in the Black Belt Academy, this basic skill is a pass and fail in our gradings. So you might be a black belt, but if you can't demonstrate safety, I'm sorry, you will not grade on that day. The important thing about the knife is to hold the knife like a knife and not like a pen. I'll come on to the smaller blades in a moment, but certainly my preferred blade is a large 22 blade, and you need to use the full boshi of this. The kasaki of this blade, the point, drawing my analogy of the sword, that's for scratching, and we're not going to be piercing with that. Use the full length of the blade. The magic angle for cutting is at 90 degrees, but if you hold the blade properly in the palm of your hand, with your thumb pressing against your middle finger and your index finger extended down the middle, you have immediately achieved that 90 degrees. 90 degrees to the tissue. And then, with the pressure of your forearm and your finger only, giving you that proprioceptive feedback, draw the knife gently and steadily down the skin, supporting it either side, all the way down in a deliberate fashion. Now, the secret with incisions, if that is your incision you've made, and we're looking at it in cross-section, often the trainee makes the incision and then another incision, then another incision in the deeper tissue, and so on. And what happens is that you will see that you've gradually reducing the length of the wound. So use the full length of the wound. Indeed, in your incisions, make sure you've got full thickness through the skin and undermine it perhaps on either side to ensure that your incision is going that way and not that way. So how do you practice pressure? Well, I'm not using pork belly this evening, but before I do that, just introduce you to a couple of other blades. So that's a 22 blade, that's a 15 and a 10, and that's an 11. Okay, 10, 11, and as the blade gets smaller, yes indeed, you may hold it like a pen. But my plastic surgical colleague in Sensei in Sheffield, Chris, has passed me this Baron blade holder. And this enables you to hold the blade in your fingertips, and you get expert control of this 15 blade as you're going around smaller circles. So indeed, the fine control for microsurgery and plastic surgery is offered now because the blade handle has changed and it gives you that rotation and ease. The 11 blade is actually used for incising abscesses or making holes for drains. But it's important that you don't just plunge it in, and simply placing your finger on the side will enable you to control the depth. But all this comes down to the principles of feel. So what I'm going to try and demonstrate here is an orange. Can you cut through an orange, feel the blade go through as you're going all the way around? All right, so you're not cutting the tissue at all. And if I've done it properly, I should be able to squeeze that, and I haven't entered the orange at all because I'm at the right depth, and you can see there's no juice coming from the orange. Whereas if I was clumsy with a knife and I didn't know how much pressure I was putting on, and I cut deeper into the tissue underneath, there you go, like that. And now I squeeze it, and you can see I'm into the tissue, and I'm getting juice down my fingers and on the plate. So simply using material you've got at home, like an orange, will enable you to feel the pressure that you need to put on. Now these blades are very sharp, and you appreciate that not much pressure is required at all. Now it's important to keep your knife perpendicular like that, clean cut in this orange, because if I actually take my knife and turn and bacon slice, this is effectively what's going to happen. You see there? You're bacon slicing the skin. And really what you want is nice incisions, deliberate at 90 degrees to the skin, all the way along. The important thing is when you're going over a long distance, do not turn around your hip. Because if you're turning around your hip, you'll end up with a curved incision. So that's why I show you the wound of somebody who's had a 22 centimeter sternotomy incision straight down the middle without turning on the hip going round. But I hope you can now appreciate the difference there between a bacon slice and a straight cut. And there we didn't go through the tissue, there we went through the tissue, and there we have bacon sliced. So I haven't tried a tomato before, but I was wondering what would be a tomato? What would happen to a tomato? And could I actually take and gently run the knife over and feel the thickness of the skin going round and take it off rather than cutting through the flesh? You will know how much pressure you put on. And the idea is that you can practice this at home yourself by using different materials and different vegetables or things in your fridge to enable you. So I'm just trying to see if I actually cut into the tomato there. And again, I didn't practice this earlier, but there you go. I am now, I hope you can see that I've effectively cut through the skin and the skin's peeled off. A bit too deep into the tomato there, but there you go. So the first principle of using the knife is to appreciate the pressure required to go through the tissues. And of course, tissues have different densities, etc. But you need to become aware of this yourself. So the next principle is feeling the tissue for dissection. And I'm opening up a fresh pack of salmon. I said to my wife I'd keep the knife clean because it will not go to waste. And I demonstrated before the fish skin turns out to be a rather fun way of practicing dissection, particularly trying to find an edge. Now, this is where brush stroking comes in, okay? That I'm now using the edge of my blade and I'm brushing it off. So I've lightened the touch of the handle and I've opened it up a little bit. And I'm trying now to brush the knife on the surface I'm taking off, okay? There you go. I'm brushing this off. And I think if you watch cooking classes, they do this with kitchen knives. But this brushing, and you see the knife is against that surface. It's stroking that surface. It's almost as if I've got a brush and I'm stroking the surface with a brush. And although this is a large 22 blade, I like it for dissection because it gives me the full length of the blade to advance the dissection. And what I like about the fish model is that if I'm not careful, one, I can see any meat of the fish appearing on this side, and on the other side, I can see if I actually have cut into the fish itself. And again, you may try this on any material. I was wondering, maybe I should do this and we have a cooking show and take the skin off a chicken. But this is particularly difficult, and it teaches you that lovely technique of brushing your knife against it and being very careful not to macerate the tissue underneath. Because the whole thing about surgery and dissection and using the knife is sharp dissection is clean dissection. All right? It means you're not macerating or damaging the tissues at all, and you're giving it the best chance to heal when you approximate it, not strangulate it, with sutures at the end. And I hope I'm demonstrating to you there how easy that is done. I wonder what it'd be like to make an incision on this. So I'm holding the skin with a knife, making a firm incision. I must say with the scales it doesn't work as well. So I'm going to abandon that bit, but certainly for dissection and brushing, that works, and for pressure and appreciation how deep you go, using different materials at home will give you that feedback and necessary proprioception to understand how to use your blade. I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope it stimulates you to actually practice these skills at home. Even in the art of drawing the sword, the samurai warrior was using low fidelity models to practice these skills. But what I like about it, even at the advanced level, they're immersing themselves on listening for the movement, and they're focusing on their breathing and drawing of the sword. Much of what they taught, I believe, applies to surgery. And what is interesting, I understand in Japan, some of the surgeons come from families with a long history of samurai. And apparently, one of the congenital operations was just adult cardiac congenital operations was described by a eminent Japanese surgeon who, because his tradition was samurai, didn't speak at international conferences, but it was his Australian trainee that took the operation and made it public and a worldwide success. The Australian trainee had his name appended to it, and the samurai warrior surgeon designed it but didn't spread it. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening for the Black Belt Academy of Surgical Skills. I appreciate your feedback. I appreciate comments. Appreciate the pictures you've sent showing me you practicing at home. My challenge to you is do suggest other material you can use to enable you to refine your knife skills. So although we're using a large blade today, and that was a live katana, with confidence and practice, you too can master the blade. Thank you very much. Be well and be safe. Good day, good night, good morning, and afternoon. Thank you. See you next week as we'll continue our journey and we'll look at knots again. Thank you.